Back to weather on the go. Oh, your weather coverage. We have a blistering heat wave on our hands, and that will be expanding eastward and northeastward over the coming days. And how hot will temperatures get? We'll get into those details, followed by a ring of fire pattern, which will persist with heavy rain and severe weather across mainly the northern states going into next week. And then the tropics are active, folks. We have a full update on the tropics and what to expect as well going into late July later on in today's video. But first up is the heat, and we have a lot of heat headlines across the west coast here, across the desert southwest and the southern plains, and even down here into South Florida. These are heat advisories all in the orange, and wherever you see the pinks, those are excessive heat warnings, and that covers much of the Sacramento Valley, much of California here, Nevada, southwestern portions of Arizona, and even parts of Texas and southern Oklahoma as well, and even parts of Utah. So we have a lot of heat headlines across the United States here as of this morning, and really the culprit for this is the high pressure ridge across the southwestern United States. Now, it did retrograde back to the west across the Sacramento Valley here and into Southern California today, but I promise you that will be moving east over the coming days. But for today, high temperatures, triple digits all across Texas Hill Country here. It will be hard pressed to find any upper 90s even across this region. We got some triple digits over here into Louisiana, but look at the desert Southwest, folks. It is 113 Fahrenheit there in Phoenix, 120, 125 or so into Death Valley. Yeah, it's very hot this afternoon, and when you factor in the heat and humidity out there, you do start to see more of these heat illnesses becoming more likely, especially in the lower Mississippi Valley, where like the Shreveport area, Jackson, Mississippi, Lake Charles, we could be approaching 110, if not 112 Fahrenheit with the heat index as we go through peak daytime heating this afternoon. But with the fuel to the south, we have more severe weather to the north. So we have an enhanced risk of severe storms from the Storm Prediction Center across the Topeka region, Wichita, Kansas City, and just north of Tulsa here. This covers much of eastern Kansas, western Missouri, and northeastern Oklahoma, with a slight risk that noses its way up here into portions of northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin toward the Milwaukee, Chicago, Rockford, Illinois region, Davenport, Quad Cities. We'll be watching out for some damaging thunderstorms later on today, and I would not be surprised if the latest update here later on this morning or this afternoon with the Storm Prediction Center actually upgrades parts of northern Illinois into an enhanced risk with a lot of sunshine poking out right now, clear skies, a lot of instability will be growing, and all that energy and fuel could go for some damaging winds and hail later on today up there. And let's look at the hazards, shall we? So looking here, we have the potential for hurricane-force wind gusts across central and eastern Kansas, Topeka, Kansas City, Wichita, getting down toward the Springfield, Missouri region and near the Tulsa area. We could be seeing those 74-plus mile-per-hour wind gusts there. But if we have an enhanced risk upgrade further to the north and east into northern Illinois, we could start to see some 60 to 65 mile-per-hour wind gusts possible later on today. We also have a decent chance for hail, a 30% hail delineation across eastern portions of Kansas into far western portions of Missouri, even a 15% shading there in northern Illinois where the instability will be growing. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets increased to 30% up in this region with all of the sunshine out there. But the tornado threat today is maximized down here into the Central Plains, so we'll continue to watch it around Kansas City, Topeka, Wichita, and Tulsa as we go through later today. So this afternoon, this is what the radar could look like here, and we start to see more of an MCS or a mesoscale convective system popping off across southeastern Nebraska, northeast Kansas. This will slowly move off to the east-southeast, bringing the threat for some significant wind damage along with it, hurricane force winds, some large hail, and even a couple of tornadoes, especially if we can get an isolated supercell or two ahead of the main complex itself. Then, as all this energy traverses across the middle Mississippi Valley and the Illinois Valley by this evening, we'll start to see explosive thunderstorm development from Milwaukee down through Rockford, the Davenport Quad Cities, Quincy, Illinois, up toward Chicago. We could be seeing some supercell thunderstorms producing winds in excess of 60 miles per hour, quarter size hail, or possibly up to ping pong ball size hail up there, and maybe a very small chance of an isolated tornado, but the tornado threat is very low there. And then that will continue through the nighttime tonight after midnight with more heavy rain across the middle Mississippi Valley. So we're going to continue to watch the threat for severe weather today, but the rainfall threat is there and much needed as well. We have lots of decent rain across portions of Kansas, the Missouri Valley down into the Ozarks region here, the Illinois Valley, where we desperately need the rainfall up towards Chicago there. We could be seeing 1 inch to maybe 2 inches of rain, depending on if you see a heavier thunderstorm move through your backyard or not through your Saturday morning. I am also concerned, though, about the Northeast. We've had a lot of rainfall in Vermont, as you well know, with lots of flooding, but we're also seeing some heavy rain into New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, down into New Jersey today as well, and that's promoting a slight to a moderate risk for flash flooding up across the Northeast into the I-95 corridor. So we really need to keep an eye on the flash flooding threat across that region, but a couple other pockets of flooding will be possible across portions of the Deep South and across portions of Virginia and North Carolina into your Saturday morning time frame. Then as we go into Saturday, more of a marginal risk for severe storms will be possible here across the Detroit area, Toronto, all the way down here through Ohio, western Pennsylvania, including the Pittsburgh region, much of West Virginia, Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, and portions of Virginia and the western Carolinas. This is probably going to remain a marginal risk. However, I do think there could be a small, slight risk introduced there toward Ohio or West Virginia as we go in towards tomorrow. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out as well. Then as we go into Sunday, that shifts further to the east, more of an isolated severe storm setup for the Northeast, and then another isolated severe storm setup from central Illinois back west there across southern Iowa, northern Missouri, southern portions of Nebraska, and northern Kansas as we go late into the weekend there on Sunday, July 16th. And this will mainly be for damaging winds and hail. The tornado risk should remain very low. Looking at the rainfall accumulation today through the start of next work week on Monday morning, decent rains expected with the heaviest of the rains across the Northeast from Maine down through Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, all the way down here into portions of New York City, Long Island. We could be seeing 2 to as much as 5 inches of rain across parts of this region. So some significant flooding will be possible, but other pockets of heavy rain will be possible here and there across the Central Plains, the Midwest, the Southeast, and getting into the Gulf Coast as we go into early next week. Looking at late this weekend, you see the ridge, the center of the ridge of high pressure is starting to slowly meander further off to the east. So this begins to build the heat a little bit further to the east across the eastern Four Corners region and the southern plains. But a pesky shortwave upper level low up here moving across portions of the western Great Lakes could provide the threat for more northwest flow and more additional storm chances at times late this weekend for the Midwestern regions. And then as we go into next week, a very interesting weather pattern setting up as far as the heat goes here. We see the heat ridge begin to build further east into Texas, Oklahoma, and the northern periphery of that ridge begins to build further to the north and east towards Nebraska, northern portions of Missouri, southwestern Illinois, perhaps towards St. Louis there as we go into next week. So that will be something to watch. So looking at late this weekend on Sunday, it is scorching hot, folks, across the desert Southwest. We could be up to 125 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit in Death Valley as we go into Sunday. Much of the same as we go into Monday, except we pull the 90s and 100s a little bit further to the east. As we go into Tuesday, same thing, building the heat further to the north and east on Tuesday. And then by Wednesday, we could be approaching 100 degrees there in the Wichita region, Kansas City, the Springfield, Missouri region, St. Louis, 90 up there into Springfield, Illinois. So it's going to be getting pretty hot further to the north and east into the Ozarks as we go into the middle of next week. But we have to watch the position of the ridge. How far north does it build? It really will tell the story where the storm track will be active as we go into next week. This is a pretty strong jet stream across the northern Rockies, the northern plains, and through the Great Lakes region over the top of that ridge, and all of that heat will provide a very deep reservoir of instability or cape across the southern United States. And we have these shortwave troughs. You see where you see the blue anomalies up here across the Great Lakes and then up across southern Canada. This will be the west-northwest flow we're going to watch through next week, especially centered around that Tuesday, Wednesday time frame as this moves across portions of the Midwest into the Ohio Valley, and as it interacts with a deep reservoir of instability and a lot of wind shear across that area, we could start to see some severe weather. So looking at the ensemble guidance, we usually look at this for more of an accurate depiction of where the storms could set up, especially as it's going into next week. So this is on Monday, July 17th. Could have some storms from the Dakotas down through Nebraska, western Iowa, getting as far south maybe as eastern Kansas again, into the Ozarks region, in towards Missouri, perhaps as far southeast as Paducah, Kentucky as well. It just depends on where the northern periphery of that ridge sets up on Monday. But right now, my severe weather forecast, anywhere in yellow, the key is down here on the left-hand side of your screen. We could have some possible severe weather from the Dakotas all the way down here into the Ozarks, into Missouri on Monday. Damaging winds and hail will be the main risk. However, a couple tornadoes will be possible, just knowing the fact that it looks like Monday is trending towards more supercells than lines of storms. So we have to deal with possibly a tornado risk with a lot of wind shear out there on Monday. Then as we go into Tuesday, the northwest flow will get a little bit stronger across the upper Midwest into the Ohio Valley. So we start to introduce more numerous storm chances across these areas from portions of Indiana, Illinois, back through Iowa, Minnesota, and the eastern Dakotas. And this could be a little bit more of a significant day for severe weather here, just looking at some of the operational models, the ensembles, and everything put together. I did go ahead and put a likely severe category here from eastern Iowa, southeast Minnesota, down through southern Wisconsin, much of the Illinois Valley here, and then into the western and central Ohio Valley. Just knowing the overlap of wind shear and the stronger instability could yield what we call an MCS, just a fancy term for a complex of storms that bring widespread damaging winds and hail across this region. That could be Tuesday. Right now, we're trending toward a later day event, so probably late afternoon, evening into the overnight hours, earliest up here into Iowa, and then later back here into the Ohio Valley. We'll have to keep an eye on this, and we'll be updating this in the coming days. And then as we go into Wednesday, that pushes a little bit further to the east-southeast across the Ohio Valley into the mid-Atlantic, and that's where we start to see more possible to likely severe weather across portions of the Ohio Valley as we go into Wednesday. But looking at the long range, all hope is not lost. So as we go through the end of July, there are signs the pattern does start to change here, where we have more drier conditions trending across the Pacific Northwest. I know it's been dry recently. That's not really a change, but we start to dry out a little more across the upper Midwest and the Ohio Valley, and we start to introduce more monsoonal flow at times across the desert Southwest here, where it's been super hot lately, and more precipitation across North Texas, Oklahoma, the deep south here into the Gulf Coast states, the southeast. That will be a welcome sight to see as we get into late July. Hopefully this holds, because some of these areas actually do need the rain down here as well. Turning to the tropical weather update, we have Hurricane Calvin across the eastern Pacific Ocean, and a 20% area here of development possible in the next week in the yellow shaded color here across the open waters behind Calvin into the eastern Pacific. Looking at Calvin on the visible satellite imagery, pretty decent looking storm, pretty compact here, pushing further to the west, and then a couple other waves trying to develop behind it. That has that 20% chance of development over the next 5 to 7 days. But looking at Calvin here, this is a 976 millibar low on Saturday, tomorrow, as it moves further west across the eastern Pacific, and it will be getting closer to Hawaii by early next week on Monday, July 17th, and this will be getting downgraded back to a tropical storm, though, as it approaches Hawaii. But as we get into the middle of next week, the European forecast model actually has us going a little bit further to the north, at least with the center of the low pressure track here, by Wednesday, July 19th, and that could mean more rain for the northern islands of Hawaii. But the GFS model is a little bit further to the south, also weakens it considerably into the middle of next week, but provides more of that low pressure track over the Hawaiian Islands, especially the Big Island as well, and that could provide more rain further to the south across the Big Island. So all in all, the GFS model, if it does verify, rainfall accumulation from now through the end of next week could be a little bit more significant. The Big Island, especially the eastern side there of the Big Island of Hawaii, could see several inches of rain, 2 to 4, maybe 5 inches of rain, a lot of runoff, and watch out for some flooding there as we go through the end of next week. That's just all we really see in Hawaii. Maybe some wave action, but no real strong winds from this system. I'm not expecting any significant wind damage or anything like that. Just mainly some isolated flooding and some waves out here in Hawaii. Now looking at the North Atlantic, we have Tropical Storm Don that has formed here over the open waters, really in the middle of nowhere across the North Atlantic. And you can see that here, kind of a semi-organized system up here. And it's kind of just spinning over the next couple of days, and you can see how it kind of moves more to the north, east, and then drops southeast. It really has no way of knowing where it's going pretty much here. It's kind of lost at sea out here in North Atlantic. So, but it will remain a tropical storm into the middle of next week. And why is that? Well, we have very warm sea surface temperatures out here. These are the anomalies. Wherever you see the oranges and the reds, that's well above average sea surface temperatures. So we are seeing some very warm waters. So there's no reason to believe this is going to weaken past tropical storm back to depression status anytime soon. But the good news is it's not really going toward any source of land. It's kind of just hanging around here, lost at sea across the North Atlantic over the next several days. Well, if you like detailed weather breakdowns on North America, including southern Canada, the United States, and the tropics, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below. It's absolutely free to do, and you get daily updates on this channel here where I keep you ahead of the storm. And be sure to press the like button, the thumbs up button down below the video. It helps out more than you know to get this weather information out to as many people as possible. I do appreciate that as well. If you want to follow me on Twitter for additional weather forecast updates where I regularly update on there throughout the week, hit the description down below the video. You can see the link for Twitter down there. It's HWeather420. I do appreciate that. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me for today's weather forecast, everybody. I hope everybody has a great rest of their Friday and a great weekend out there.